Welcome to Below the Forest Floor. My name is Nancy and I'm here with my husband / co-host Ryan.
Hello.
Today we are going to be talking about the hide-and-seek champion of the world, Bigfoot. Did I get you to giggle, Ryan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so actually we have merch that has to do with the hide-and-seek champion of the world.
Oh, yeah, because you made a design that we wanted to put on shirts for it and stuff.
Yep, and if you guys want to check it out, you can check out our social media. We just recently made some posts about it, and I will be sharing it along with the notification that this episode has come out. And it's basically a silhouette of Bigfoot in the forest and says, hide and seek champion of Below the Forest Floor or something like that. And it's so cute.
Yeah, it is.
Now, if you don't know who or what Bigfoot is, imagine a 6 to 15 foot tall creature. Yeah, that's like a big range to imagine.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of variations that you hear about all the time, so.
And also, apparently, there's little ones, like there's families,
Yeah.
So maybe that's the smaller side of things. But anyways, imagine a 6 to 15 foot tall creature that stands almost completely upright like a human. They kind of have like a little bit of a slump. They didn't sit up, a lot through their childhood. And they have a body of a gorilla, basically. The fur on their head and body is extremely long and can even create a beard of sorts on their faces. And some depictions I've seen have even shown the children and the female of the Bigfoot species with these beards. So they're almost like what are they called from Lord of the Rings?
I don't know.
What Gimli is.
Oh, dwarf.
Yeah. So just,
Okay.
I remember them mentioning that all the women have beards too in that species.
Yeah.
So yeah, his feet are said to be about 18 inches in length. That's like the majority of the reports. You're obviously going to see people saying different lengths, but the majority that I found were about 18 inches in length and 9.2 inches in width. And that is according to an actual footprint that was found by Roger Patterson in Bluff Creek, North Carolina in 1967. The legend of Bigfoot has been around for decades, yet people still debate on whether the timelines are accurate. Some people believe that the story of Bigfoot only dates back to the 1950s when it actually became popular. Honestly, that's what a lot of people believe. It's like when it became popular, that's when everyone's like, oh, that's when it started.
Yeah, because it's usually like the collective consciousness when it goes back to that.
Yeah, and others say that it dates back to 1811 when David Thompson, a British explorer, came across a set of footprints that were abnormally large. The story goes that David was out in the West Territory of the Rocky Mountains when he and his team found what he says were animal tracks the size of a mammoth, which that I think would be a little bit bigger than the 18 inches that people have shown or seen, because mammoths were humongous. It's like that's an elephant of sorts.
I can't remember exactly, like, it might be about that much. Like,
I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I haven't seen even an elephant up close, so.
I thought you were going to say, I haven't seen a mammoth in a while. But, so yeah, they were just walking around the mountains. They found this ginormous foot. They compared it to the size of a mammoth. He wrote down the measurements and eventually dismissed the findings, calling them bear prints, as he could not believe a mammoth would have even been around to make those tracks. Although many people say that the sizes were written down, and that they were written down and were too big to be of a grizzly, I never found any sizes anywhere. Every article I found on this man, they talk about him writing down the sizes, but not the actual sizes. Just too big to be a grizzly is what some people said. Now, because David Thompson compared the size of the footprints to grizzly bears, it caused a lot of controversy in the community because they were like, well, if they're bear footprints, stop thinking that it's Bigfoot or some crazy creature. He already dismissed it. He said it was something else. But other people were like, no, they don't really know that because, first of all, we don't have pictures saying otherwise. We don't know what the shape was. We don't know if he just blew it off as that because of him being like, it's generally this size. Now I don't want to sound crazy, so I'm just going to say it's this. So a lot of people believe it because of that. A lot of people don't believe it because in their minds, it should just be dropped after the comparison. But what do you think?
I really have no idea when it comes to that, because when it comes to some of those things with controversies from back then, it's really hit or miss.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I get it. Like, when you're going through something and let's say you hear a disembodied voice at 3 a.m. while you're home alone, you start telling yourself, it's the neighbor kids playing outside. So you hear something like this and you see something as crazy as what you would assume was a mythical creature's footprint. You start telling yourself, that's not a made up creature. That's definitely something that already exists. So it's possibly another theory that I have about what happened with Thompson. Maybe he was getting backlash also, because a lot of people back then would just start saying you were crazy or needed to be admitted if you start thinking anything that what was the norm. Even though people have already credited David Thompson with the first ever sighting of the Bigfoot prints, a lot of people claim that the North American indigenous people actually have had art depictions of what Bigfoot looks like dating 500 to 1,000 years. But that's according to some sources. Apparently, the name Sasquatch actually comes from the Salish language used by the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest and Southwest Canada, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica online. Another interesting trait that the indigenous people of this area have given Bigfoot is that he is magical. Now, I have never heard this theory before. All I have to say is that I completely respect all of the ideas and thoughts and theories that are given, and if any of this is incorrect, I apologize. It is based off of articles I did find and interviews. I want to make sure that everyone knows I'm not dismissing anything that communities are building off of from their own beliefs. But one of the magical abilities that Bigfoot is said to have in this belief, or from what I read, is that he is psychic. And the reason that you cannot see a Bigfoot, even though he could be standing right in front of you, is that he makes it so. Like almost like a Jedi mind trick of sorts. And another thing that people mention, like, you know how people could be saying they saw Bigfoot and then all of a sudden they didn't see him anymore? It's usually because they say he can move to different dimensions. And that's how he shows up here and is able to hide elsewhere. He's just in a different plane of existence.
I've heard those ones too, where that's one of the examples given for why you don't see any remains. Also, is that they might be creatures that bury their dead as well. Also, is what I've heard. Do
you think that Bigfoot could be one of those species that does that?
Well, that's what I was talking about. Was that they have been claimed to, that's like an example is given is like, what if the reason why you can't find Bigfoot remains is because what if they bury their dead or anything like that, so you can't really find remains because they're all buried,
and you don't know what to look for if you're looking for remains because you don't know.
The remains may look just like normal, ape, prime, anything like that.
Yeah. And also, like, you don't know to look for things that are in the ground. You don't know to go searching for it if you don't know there's something buried there. So they could just be there.
You can't excavate an entire state.
Yeah. So that was just another really interesting thought process, because all I've ever heard of Bigfoot is he's a big, hairy monster. That's it. Like, there's nothing special about him or crazy or out there, until I read the ideas that the indigenous people have had on Bigfoot. And before we move on, I wanted to wish everyone a safe and educational Indigenous Peoples Day for this coming Monday. I would like to invite you all to take this time to educate yourself about the beautiful culture of Indigenous peoples and pay respects to the lives, cultures, and lands lost throughout history to colonization and whitewashing of history. We see you, we hear you, and we stand with you here below the forest floor. Although the concept of a creature like Bigfoot has been around for a very long time, the actual Bigfoot story as we know it today became popularized back in 1958 when editor for the Humboldt Times, Andrew Genzoli, I think that's how you pronounce it, was working on an article about Gerald Crew, a man who had found what he claimed to be Bigfoot tracks while working. But we'll talk more about Gerald's story in a little bit. According to the site Newsweek, as Andrew was working on the article, he decided to name the mysterious creature with the abnormally large prints Bigfoot, and that's how we got the name that we use today. But other sources, such as the History Channel, that wrote an article on this, say that it wasn't Andrew who came up with the name at all. They claim it was a fellow Humboldt Times writer, Betty Allen, that was inspired by Andrew's mysterious large-footed creature article, where he only compared this new cryptid to the abominable snowman. She was so intrigued by this one-shoot Sunday morning clipping that she decided to write a more in-depth piece and call this abominable snowman-like creature Bigfoot, and that's like not Bigfoot all put together, big and then foot separated, based off of the most prominent feature that they noticed. So some people actually credit Betty Allen as being the person who named Bigfoot. Now, moving on to the story of Gerald Crew, the man who found the famous tracks that would end up being plaster cast and shown to the world as the first piece of tangible evidence of Bigfoot's existence. Ryan, would you like to do the honors?
The year was 1958. Gerald Crew, or Jerry Crew as some of the articles may refer to him, was working in Humboldt County, California as a bulldozer operator for a logging company. While at the work site, he noticed an abnormally large pair of footprints and immediately went to tell the crew. As it turns out, he wasn't the only one that had seen similar prints throughout their time with the logging company. Many claimed to have seen them at other sites that they worked at as well, but because of this being such a strange occurrence, they just kept it to themselves, possibly to avoid backlash or mockery by the media and community. He went to the Humboldt Times to speak of his findings and show a plaster cast of an 18-inch footprint. Although the crew is credited with the finding and evidence, some sources, such as the Arizona State Museum, claim that it was a road contractor named Ray Wallace who initially found the prints and told the co-workers. Basically the same story of Gerald Crew, except for the fact that in Ray's instance, it was declared a hoax by his own family. Wow.
Yeah.
How did they find out, you may ask? Well, Ray himself told him in 2002, right before his passing. They later found a pair of large wooden feet that had been carved to the exact shape and measurements of the prints that Ray found in 1958. That is actually another thing that happened with a more recent one, the one that happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
Turned out to be a hoax, and you could find the person had like these big wooden shoes also.
Yeah.
Wow.
What do you think? Like, I just hear wows coming from you.
That's pretty much it. That is in my head right now.
Isn't that insane though? Like, the first one, people claim to be true because he never came out with being, saying something like that he had done. But this person actually, like, the full story of how they found it is after he told them that he had faked the whole thing, they went looking in his storage, what was like a shed in the back of his house, and they found the pair of big wooden feet in the storage shed. After all those years, he kept them. That means he was planning to tell someone on his deathbed about what he had done, and the person who actually went and told the media was his daughter. Yeah, like she went and like I don't know if he thought that maybe his family was gonna keep it a secret, like, oh, he told us this big secret, we should just keep it, or
he just figured that I'm dying, it doesn't really care. It
doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So the daughter actually was the one who went and decided, you know what, I'm gonna go tell everyone what's going on. And because of that, a lot of people actually were like, okay, this whole thing's been faked since the beginning, stop believing in Bigfoot altogether. Other people who have the other evidence that they talked about from the stuff with the indigenous peoples and the other person, Gerald, that we talked about earlier, said that this wasn't enough evidence to dismiss Bigfoot altogether just because people lie about stuff all the time. So they were like, it's going to happen with any cryptid, any urban legend. And so they just have decided to just try to find their own actual evidence instead. And as you can see, Bigfoot is still a popular topic everywhere. So it's not like that ruined anything, the 90s hoax or this one, because people are still out there making documentaries of chasing Bigfoot or looking for him or whatever. So honestly, just being a jerk and doing something like that means nothing. If you believe hard enough, it means nothing. Now, one piece of evidence that people are still torn on to this day is the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. Oh, I hear giggling next to me.
I can't remember what the show was called, but there was a show on TV back in like the mid-90s that this was shown on. That had like a bunch of different like monster stuff and cryptids and all those things before I knew that they were called cryptids. that showed that film. I remember seeing that as a very little kid. I was probably like 6 or 7. I saw it and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then that probably got me started on all of this.
That was the Gateway documentary, or the Gateway show. I wish you could remember like what it was called. So I would love to watch that and like review it on the channel.
I could try to do some searching later on.
Oh, so. I love that. Yes. 100%. Thank you. But yes, the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 was filmed in Bluff Creek, California. If you have ever seen the old vintage-looking video of a grainy Bigfoot striding along the forest beyond some rocks, this is the video I'm talking about.
And doing the infamous turn and look over his shoulder.
Yep, that one's it. This film starts off with someone filming a man riding a horse with what looks like a donkey by his side. They are filming this man as if it's a whole movie being made to preserve a memory of a day out in the woods, when suddenly the camera begins to shake and you see the movement of the camera look like the person that's holding it is swinging their arms as if they're running. When the camera pans upward again, you see a huge creature with long black fur walking on 2 feet. The creature turns back as if noticing the person in the distance that is filming, and it continues on its walk. As the creature reaches a few trees, the videographer tries to run forward to continue filming, and the camera shakes. Once the shaking stops, the creature is no longer visible for a good little while. That is until the videographer finally catches a glimpse of him off in the distance for a moment before the film completely cuts off. I actually had to rewatch this because I remember seeing little bits and pieces, of course, growing up. Every news source was throwing it out there, and it would resurface every few years, but I hadn't watched it in years, so I rewatched it, and personally, for me, it felt like, because he didn't care, it felt like, okay, maybe it was just the person he was filming before, like they cut the video and then the person put the costume on and then they filmed that, but it felt like so seamless for like, if I'm putting my tin little foil hat on, it's like, okay, maybe, he's filming this guy goes off and all of a sudden he sees something, he's like, oh snap, creature. But at the same time, it's like, what if it's just the guy that was with them? Because they did have bags with them as well. And you don't know.
It could also have just been a third person in general.
Oh, I didn't think of that either. So yeah, it could have been a person. It could have been anything, really. Maybe it was true. I don't know. But with videos that are this old, it's kind of hard to tell because the graininess and poor quality can hide a lot of costume edges and seams. And it honestly looks mostly like a black fur or a black fur silhouette that you see throughout the video because of this. And it's not like you can say they did it on purpose. It was the 60s. Only people with decent money had home cameras, and they weren't that great back then. It's not like they could fake the quality.
I know what the quality looks like from a home camera sort of thing from the 90s when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I know what kind of graininess comes with those. I can't imagine one from even further back.
Yeah, you can't see. It looks like a shadow.
I remember. And the thing is, like, yes, they have been, like, there's been people debunking this video for ages. Mm-hmm. But I will say that for me personally, I'm still 50-50 on that because with other stories that I've heard of people that have seen a Bigfoot or anything like that, there was a story of a group of campers that kept hearing loud noises in the dark, and when they went to the area where they heard that, they then heard the noise across a creek from them that was like something was lobbing big tree branches and big rocks over the river at them. And some of them were big enough that the kids all together could not move this rock.
Oh, wow.
So, like, it's something that you see from that far away. It may not care because it might have been, like, it might just be knowing that maybe
There's nothing to fear if it's you.
Yeah. It's like, it looks at you and it's like, I'm not afraid of you or something like that. It might not be territorial also. There is that.
Because I was like thinking if they're territorial, wouldn't they like go after a person in their area?
Yeah. As soon as they see something like that, they would have probably attacked if it's a territorial creature. If it's not territorial or if it's like it was just walking outside of its quote-unquote territory, it's not going to want to bother anyone. And it's in the daylight. A lot of these things might not be wanting to get into a scruff with anybody in the daytime. Also, like, you know, keeping your tinfoil hat on and everything, it's like, if this is an intelligent being, it's everything is against it at that point. So it probably wouldn't, if it did like kind of strategically think about that situation, he might have figured also is that there's 2 people there, or 3 if there was anyone else in their group. I'm not going to mess with them because I'm outnumbered right now.
Right.
You know, even though I may be bigger and stronger or anything like that, it's like, it's still, there's more people. And if the Bigfoot had, you know, run into people before, maybe he knows that around that time, maybe people have weapons. Maybe there's something that he might not have necessarily cared, but he might have just not wanted to worry about it and just continue walking, you know.
But also a creature of the woods, who is usually kind of hidden. He may have seen what these hairless creatures can do to other animals in the woods with the weapons.
There you go. See? Exactly. Like, if you go, I know that there's some traditions and folklore behind Bigfoots being kind of like guardians of forests.
That was something I forgot to put earlier with the indigenous peoples side of things, but they do, a lot of tribes do see him as a protector of sorts.
I don't want to be incorrect completely by this, so like I may butcher this entire little thought, so I am sorry. But I do believe that there is a deity, for lack of a better term, that is something that really resembles a Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
When I was doing research, I did see something on it, but I wasn't sure because some of the sources looked kind of sketchy, and I don't want to offend anybody or upset anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That was something that has come up. We don't know how true to point that is, but so yeah, if he is a guardian of the forest, then you could probably believe that he watches over everything.
And if you're anybody who's more knowledgeable on us, or you're a part of that culture, please let us know. We love learning. We love being taught and educated on these things. We are not going to dismiss being shown something actually new to us.
And I would love to have a conversation with someone that knows about that sorts of things, because, you know, that it's a conversation that should be had, you know, and possibly I would love to even try to have like an interview with a person that can explain stuff like that. We can have like a little update, you know.
Yeah, I would love that. If anybody out there wants to reach out and help either correct us or educate us on the things that we spoke about today with that side of things, please let us know. We want to be able to make sure we get the correct information out there.
So going off of the whole guardian thing again, was like, if you can imagine that it's probably watching over the creatures of the forest, and yes, it probably did see what these hairless creatures had done to, let's say, like deer or, you know, pheasants, bears, or anything like that, bears too.
If it could take down
wolves.
A bear.
So yeah, it's like in your head you would be thinking that, okay, I've seen what these things can do, I'm just going to leave them alone right now. You know, you're not looking threatening to me, so I don't feel like I have anything to worry about, and I'm not going to pose a threat to them just in case, you know, they pop off or something. So
right. So before we move on to like the variations of Bigfoot and talking about our ideas and thoughts, because you did mention the skunk ape, yes, and there's obviously like the Yeti and Abominable Snowman. We're not gonna go we're not gonna go too into like detail. We're basically gonna talk about the stories we know, a few things here and there, read a few articles, and possibly give theories on them, because this is mostly the Bigfoot episode and these are just variations. But before we get into that, I have a really funny little fact that I was actually, when I was researching, I told a group of friends on Discord, and they lost it. They were laughing so hard. So apparently, when I was doing research, apparently the Washington National Guard website has something to do with Bigfoot.
Okay.
I just see Ryan roll his eyes like immediately. So when I was looking on there, they had a little story about Bigfoot. They spoke about how the name Sasquatch comes from the Salish tribes and of the Flathead Reservation, where people have claimed to have seen Bigfoot near, and they talk about how there were sightings of Bigfoot that dated back far as the 1800s to the 1900s, like I spoke of. And they they actually have taken this to heart, so much so that there's actually a wooden statue of Bigfoot at the Western Air Defense Sector because the Washington Air National Guard has adopted him as their mascot, and he watches the wooden statue watches the skies for them.
I was wondering where that was going. It was like, oh yeah, that Bigfoot is my co-pilot.
They should make merch like that for the National Guard.
No, I'm trademarking that. That's ours.
Bigfoot is my co-pilot. The only people who are going to get that are going to be the people who listened to this podcast or are a part of the National Guard there. All right, Ryan, you got to tell me what you're thinking because you're crying laughing over there.
Just the Bigfoot as a co-pilot. I actually made myself laugh too hard with that.
But yeah, because it was literally the very first thing that popped up. I clicked on the article and I was just reading information, and then I was like, what news source is this? Because Below the Fourth Floor always checks their news sources. We always check our sources, and we always try to pick the most accurate sources. And if we mention anything that's not accurate, it's usually to show the ridiculousness of things at times. But I was like, okay, so what website am I on? And I just see National Guard, and I was like, wait, really? Is this like a fake page? Nope, it was a .gov and everything.
You know, that almost kind of reminds me of the Denver International Airport with the gigantic demonic horse statue.
We have to do an episode on that.
We have to do an episode on the entire airport because it is trippy inside of there.
What was the name of it again?
The Denver International Airport. Oh, trust me, I'll remember. It gets into conspiracy territory, so that's going to definitely need to be a...
big flag right there at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's like, we are not telling people we are spitting facts. We are just letting people know what we've heard and what people have seen.
We will definitely go into the stories that are being told about it, and just as a reminder that it is all just theories. But the real, like, the facts about it, the things that are inside of there, I don't mean to detract from this for too long, but
go for it.
My goodness, it's crazy.
I've seen some things about it.
Okay, so it's an airport.
Yeah.
Okay, that has a gigantic blue with like red fiery looking eyes. A far too detailed sculpture of a horse. I understand, Denver, they kind of have this thing with horses sometimes.
So Denver is the horse girl state.
Because the Denver Broncos.
Oh, right.
But that's another thing.
Okay.
I believe that the statue was made before the team was made, so like maybe the team took that as a mascot, kind of, But the things that are inside of it is like, this is an airport, okay? It does not need to have a museum. It has museums that are dedicated to things from World War II, from Egypt. There is a life-size Anubis statue in a Denver International Airport.
Why? Like, what is the point?
And there is this crazy, like, painting along the wall of these different murals that goes from, like, children with guns and, like, this dude with a gas mask on. And then it goes to, like, a bunch of people that are, like, buried in the ground, like, almost open graves.
In an airport? Like,
in the last one is like, it has this rainbow that is going behind all of it that leads down into like this. I can't remember the last mural. Dang it! It's crazy though. That's gonna be one that we have to do, but we had to take our time on researching it because there's a lot of stuff.
I do have the next 3 months next October, November, December planned out. So like we have that much time.
We'll have to do little bits at a time. With each one of those. So yeah.
That sounds insane. Like, ew.
Imagine like I think it was like, it's rumored to have like a 6 or a 7 story basement.
What? What's down there?
That's the conspiracy theory side of it, is that like it was built like some person claimed to have found blueprints because someone an ancestor of theirs worked on it. But it was like...
Oh, like they're not called ancestors. They're called something else. I forgot what it was called.
Oh, yeah, but like a relative of theirs from a great whatever.
Yeah.
had worked on it, had these like blueprints or little pieces of it or something like that, and shows that like there was a basement that was like 6 or 7 stories deep as like a bunker or something like that.
Oh my god.
Back to Bigfoot.
Yeah, like what? Why? First of all, like I kind of want to go and see it, but I'm also a little creeped out to go and see it.
Oh, I would love to just spend the money just to fly to Denver, to the airport, and just, you know, spend a day walking around there, spend the night in a hotel or something like that, and then just come home. Like,
I mean,
worth the money.
I would be down for that. Something I do find interesting is the thought of Bigfoot variations, like mentioned before with the abominable snowman or Yeti. If you don't know what these creatures are, imagine Bigfoot, but with completely white fur because it spends its time in the snow or in snowier areas. The first publicized recorded sighting of one of these creatures goes back all the way to the 1920s, when Henry Newman, a journalist, interviewed a group of explorers that had just come down from Mount Everest. Apparently, while they were up there, they found a pair of huge footprints in the snow, bigger than they'd ever seen before, and claimed that it must have been a monster-like creature. Yetis and abominable snowmen are so popular, in fact, that they have been featured on children's movies such as the classic claymation Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 1964, all the way to the 2019 children's movie Abominable. Although these depictions have shown an endearing and adorable side to the Yeti, because I know I love the abominable snowman from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's so cute. Many say that encountering one in the wild may be the last thing that you do.
And one of the things that I remember was that that same TV show that I watched with the whole Bigfoot thing. There was another one that was on. They were talking about like some of the reported stories of the Yeti, and I remember like they made like this reenactment of it, where like these adventurers, these hikers that were up in the mountains, they had taken shelter inside of like a shed, almost like a little wooden shed, and like something was outside like banging on the door and banging on the walls really bad all the way up until morning, and then it was gone.
I feel like I remember that, but it's little flashes, because I'm younger than you by a couple of years, so you might have been a little older when you saw that, like when it came out, and like my brain's just like, I'm getting little flashes of a show having that, but like it's not all there. Like you're saying that and my brain's just like exploding.
I could probably find that on YouTube actually, but yeah, that was one of the early things for the Yeti that I remember. And I remember that same book. Remember the book that I told you about that I had that was with the Chupacabra?
We have to find that book, like, to buy it.
It also had a story about the Yeti and a Bigfoot. I don't remember the Bigfoot story, but I do remember the Yeti story that was in it. And it had said that someone had captured one, had it in a cage, and it, like, within the first day of it, but with them capturing it before they could take it anywhere to show anyone, it had fallen ill. Within the next couple hours, it had died, decomposed, and then disappeared. All within a couple hours.
Do you know what that makes me think of? Like, I don't know where I heard it. It's like, it's locked in my memory somewhere, and I hate it because I want to remember the whole thing. But I kind of heard stories where creatures like that are from other dimensions, when they pass, that's how they pass. Like, their bodies leave no trace. Like, I saw this one thing a long time ago. It's like so blurry. That's why I didn't want to mention it. But it's of like an alien passing away. And when the alien was passing away, it just was like turning to dust almost in that person's, like, not arms, but like the vicinity, like where they had them held. And like that's just, I don't know if a lot of people made that up just so that they wouldn't need to show evidence or anything, or if it's like a dimensional thing, like they go back to their dimension in a way when that happens. And
there has been like sort of proof that there are other dimensions, depending on which scientist group you're listening to. I know that Neil deGrasse Tyson has talked about some things like that, so I'll follow along with, you know, the things that he says. And if there is other dimensions, we don't necessarily understand what it could be like, what are the rules of this sort of thing in the ways of, like how our rules are for, our dimension so far, where it's like, gravity, things like that. We don't know what would be like if any of us are able to travel to a different dimension or something like that. If you passed away in that other dimension, like, does your body come back here sort of thing, like there's no like link between them anymore. So then like you would go back to where you were from, but when that happened, so that's an option, I guess.
And I've heard that a lot. Like, I've heard so many things because of the kinds of places I end up on TikTok and social media and the people I end up talking to in real life and their beliefs in religion. And a lot of them have these thoughts of like going to another dimension, and like when you pass away, your physical body is here, but your soul will go to another dimension and start a new life there. Or that's like people's, I guess, version of reincarnation in a way. And a lot of people can claim that maybe humans' bodies aren't able to be processed as quickly as these mythical, magical creatures that have all these parts of them, because technically we also decompose over time, and I guess they're just doing it at a rate that's much quicker than our bodies are.
It could be.
I don't know. That's definitely a possibility. But I do vaguely remember what you're talking about with the Yeti thing, and I've heard so many stories about like people saying that a lot of the people that go up into the mountains and don't come back, they were the victims. I don't know if it's another one of those things where they needed an excuse to just be like why they didn't come back, and they didn't just freeze to death or whatever. But some people claim that they were eaten by Yetis or whatever.
And some of the people that one of the other ones that sometimes can happen is like the people that are going to climb a mountain, they kind of get scared, they don't want to continue, and then they just kind of make up a story as to why they couldn't finish. But I remember the other thing I was talking about now, and that was the huge footprints from the people in Mount Everest. It could have just been snowshoes. Because snowshoes are like basically tennis rackets on your feet. So that's way larger than any footprint you'd ever see before. So.
And back then, not a lot of people were going up there. And when you did go up there, it was like this big thing. So if maybe people indigenous to this area might have gone up before them, they're like, oh, could it have possibly been more people like us? It was just a monster. I get that. I understand.
Like I said, I'm on both sides of almost every issue. I like to see both sides of it to see what can be proven, what can be disproven, what could have other ideas attached to it. So,
as someone who's experienced a lot of crazy, unexplainable stuff happening right before my eyes, it's so hard for me to just dismiss people now, because some of it just sounds so silly. You just want to look at that person and be like, really? Did that really happen? But then you're like, some people feel that way about you and the things you say you've experienced, because a lot of things you went through have been very out there, not normal. And a lot of people haven't experienced these things. Like when we were talking to Tyler that one time, and he was mentioning that he had never been through anything weird. And I honestly thought he was just like, maybe not believing, but he was just like more pouting that he hadn't been through something like that. I was like, no, be thankful. It's very strange. And it's kind of like, it puts this part like of fear in you where it's like, okay, now what's gonna have ghosts? What weird thing is gonna happen here or there now again? And so it's like, it's just so difficult to be on the side completely of skepticism and just completely not believe someone, because then at that point, then I would have to be the kind of person that understands, like, I went through things I saw and felt, and people are just gonna dismiss it. So I don't want to be that person to someone who truly believes they saw or experienced something themselves. But I'm not just going to go believe everything someone's telling me. I do want sources and evidence and at least a good story, dang. So now we wanted to just basically have honorable mentions. Creatures that are Bigfoot-like, probably in the same category or species, just different variations of how they evolved and all that other good stuff that happens with evolution. So basically, skunk ape. is a Floridian version of Bigfoot, and they can usually go all the way to the Georgia state line. I don't know why that's where it ends. Maybe it's like the swampy kind of humid area is what they prefer for skunk ape.
I believe that's actually where some of the Everglades stop.
Okay. So that's usually also where it is found, and it stands upright just like Bigfoot does. The difference is it's much shorter than Bigfoot. The average is between 5 and 7 feet tall, so they're pretty small, and their tallest height is like about the tallest human height that you can get. And so they're about human sized. They have reddish brown hair, and it's kind of short compared to Bigfoot because, like I mentioned earlier, Bigfoot's fur is very long, whereas the skunk ape, it's very short and spiky in some areas. And
it would kind of need to be. It would kind of need to be because it's in Florida, so like if it had long hair, it'd be like the thought of
the climate,
yeah,
with the Yeti and all that.
Kind of like how some people would say like if T-Rex had fur or something like that when it was in the heat, it'd probably die of, you know, overheating and stuff. So like if it had long hair in Florida, it would be running pretty hot.
Well, you know, there are some creatures that have the self-regulation in their bodies and all that stuff. But
there you go. You see the skunk ape walking around panting like a dog.
What if that's why it stinks? Okay, so that's like another feature of the skunk ape. That's why it's called the skunk ape. It stinks. It's horribly smelly. People say it's the first thing you notice about it. That's how you know it's near. It smells awful.
It's not even near at that point. Apparently the smell for it goes for a long ways.
Wow. It's another good way to explain pollution in Florida. But anyways, the skunk ape actually is extremely smelly, and maybe that's why it's got fur and it's living in the swamps, Ryan. Could you imagine something like that living out there, running that warm and with fuzz all over?
Yeah, that would be pretty rough.
And it does have like some pale patches on its fur. We saw so many depictions that were so awkward looking because it had patches on the chest area and down near the belly button and on its knees for some reason. Like, why would you need patches on your knees of no fur? Like, it's not even like the whole leg, just the knee, no fur. Why? I did not understand why it ended up looking like that. And it's so creepy. It looks like just a very hairy human in a lot of depictions. Like, a lot of features that I've seen is not very ape-like. It just looks like a very hairy person. And I thought it was just really creepy. But those are apparently the ways that you know you've run into a skunk ape. It's mostly the smell and that it's kind of shorter than a Bigfoot with shorter hair, and the hair is the reddish brown color that we mentioned.
And the skunk ape has also been in folklore from the European settler periods. The Seminole myth talks about a thing called the Esti Kapkaki?
Cupcake.
Cupcakey. A name which roughly translates to cannibal giant. So, like, that's been talked about since the 1960s also? Oh, no, that's the sightings of it.
Does that mean that they possibly saw this eat a person? Or maybe a person went missing, they assumed this ate the person and that's what happened to them?
I'm not sure, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Because when I was looking up all the stuff about Bigfoot and the variations, I didn't find out what exactly it ate. Like, I'm sure it's possibly an omnivore. I don't think it would just be a herbivore based off of some of the depictions. It would possibly eat fish, small rodents, small animals that are found in the forest. It didn't attack that person that filmed it, you know, if it was real. And so maybe it just goes after small things that it can eat, but at the same time it's like, could it just be a carnivore? Like, does it just eat small creatures? Does it hunt for berries? Are they smart enough to do that? Because people say sometimes they're in packs, but nobody's ever said they've seen a pack. I did see this, I was watching this documentary on Bigfoot one time, a long time ago, where this lady claimed to have seen a tiny Bigfoot run across the road when she was driving near a forested area. And because it was so small, it was almost like, I guess, the size of a skunk ape, but it wasn't in Florida. She said that she thought it was like the child of a Bigfoot, like the way it just ran into the road.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah, I heard that on a different podcast. They were talking when they were talking about Bigfoot. That was one of the stories.
Really? Because I heard that, I saw it on a TV show that I was watching, and it creeped me out. First of all, kids scare me sometimes. Like, when little kids say that they remember things that they shouldn't remember, and they start naming people from the past that are dead, and it's like, okay, or the little kid's like, grandpa's in the corner and grandpa's been gone for a few years. So kids already scare me, but the thought of little Bigfoot baby children running just out in front of cars scares me so bad. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's funny though.
Why did I imagine it chasing a ball?
Oh yeah. Like, that's why it was crossing the road. Why'd the tiny Bigfoot cross the road? To get his ball. Alright, so that's like discussing with the skunk ape.
That's all we found. We researched, we tried like so many sources.
We had to resort to looking at Wikipedia to actually get, because any of like the websites and everything like that just talks about a dude's zoo basically. In Florida.
This one man in Florida who said he saw it when he was 10. Again in the 90s, filmed it. That's literally... It mostly talks about this guy. It doesn't really talk about the actual Bigfoot. Or skunk ape, my bad.
Yeah. The other one comes from China, which is the Yeren, which is translated to wild man. They have been seen most famously in, I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it's in the Hubei province of China. Sightings of hairy men have been, reported ever since the Warring States period in China, circa 340 BCE, all the way through to the Tang Dynasty, which was 618 to 907 CE. So now it's been like the modern legends of the year that you hear about now. They're described as savage, strong, fast-moving. They live in caves and descend down to raid villages for food.
Which I think is a really interesting thing, because everything that we've heard of so far just kind of has been seen roaming the lands anywhere, not really going into any kind of home that has been created for them or made in general by nature. So it does make you wonder, like, is that where all the Bigfoots kind of are? And that's why people don't really go and find them as quickly, because you see a cave, you think maybe a bear's in there. You're not going to go in there and mess around and find out that it's a bear. But maybe this could be the only kind of species that actually does make a home for themselves in these kinds of areas. Because I know there are certain species of animals that will make a home for themselves, others who would just lay on the ground somewhere under a tree or something, or in the trees. So I do think that's very interesting that they make a home for themselves. But the other thing I find interesting is that, unlike the very peaceful Bigfoot, the Yeren has gone into a village knowing there are people there, and they will go and raid it for food. Like, they don't care how they get their food. They're just gonna go get their food. They don't care about the people that are there. They don't care to be civil towards them. They're not afraid of them. And for me, the word raid can sometimes also mean like multiple people are going, not just one creature. So maybe they travel in packs, and that's why people are so afraid of them. They don't feel like they can take them.
Which leads people to speculate that it could be a far removed human relative, such as the Gigantopithecus or the Paranthropus robustus. I don't know about that one, but I do know the Gigantopithecus is basically just like dinosaur age-ish ancient Bigfoot. It's like,
and people do believe, like the way the Loch Ness, people believe that it evolved from, what was it, plesiosaur? People believe that that's maybe where Bigfoot either evolved from or is still actually what is it called again? Gigantopithecus. Yeah. It actually still exists. This is just what it looks like now, adapting to the world around it and how it is these days. So that's also another idea that people have come up with. But the last actual Bigfoot variation that we're going to talk about is the Yowie, which is from Australia. And we are going to talk about some theories after this, because some people have claimed that Bigfoot is more than just a creature that lives here on Earth. And that sounds kind of weird because now I'm just imagining a Bigfoot flying a spaceship. Or maybe Chewbacca. Oh my god. My brain just exploded. Like, that just popped into my head. Like, I hadn't thought that far. But anyways, well, now I can imagine Bigfoot flying a ship. And I'm going to stop myself for a second because I'm getting the giggles. So, the creature that we're talking about now is about 6 foot 11 inches to 12 feet, which is a little bit smaller than America's Bigfoot, but a lot bigger than the skunk ape from Florida. So it's kind of like, I guess, the Bigfoot average size, what you would run into, still bigger than people, obviously. And people that have looked for tracks of the Yowie say that it has an inconsistent shape and toe number, but think about like the wild animals out just hunting and doing their own thing. They're gonna lose a few toes here and there. I've seen a whole pigeon without a leg before, just minding its business, going along and eating stuff off the ground. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah, because can you imagine a thing like that's that size stubbing that toe? It's gonna want to take it off.
So you think maybe it took it off itself? Like, that's a possibility.
Maybe.
Oh man, then that would be like, okay, dude, does the species know how to use tools? And then my brain just starts going like, oh man, the possibilities are endless.
Or it just grabs and pulls until it goes.
Right? Oh god, now it's a horror story.
I just imagine like caveman like grabbing his toe and everything. I was like, "Arr! Just screaming as he pulls it off or something.
Oh my god. Well, you know what? I feel like a caveman would have used a tool, because they did have tools. Anyways, the Yowie is unlike the gentle American Bigfoot, is actually quite violent and aggressive, or as it is described. Some actually do report it being a little shy, but maybe when it's hungry it gets aggressive, because one picture that we found that dates back to 1907 has what looks like a very tall, skinny goblin creature with a tail. I have not seen a Bigfoot with a tail yet. The Yowie does in this photo have a tail with very sharp, pointy ears. It's swallowing a person. Its mouth is gaping open and there are human legs swinging out of this thing's mouth. So it's not going to not eat people according to this depiction. But as I mentioned, this is a drawing from 1907, which means that this thing is pretty old. It's not something brand new someone came up with. And the term, I guess, was used among I cannot pronounce this.
I'm not even going to try.
It is the indigenous people in Australia. They used the term in 1875 for Yowie, and I think it's really interesting that it dates back that far. I could not imagine seeing something like this, or believing that you just saw something, that you had to draw something eating it. It's like, wow, what kind of trauma would you have from something like this?
Yeah, that's the whole idea of it being especially violent and aggressive just kind of scares me.
And Yowie, or what did you pronounce it earlier?
When people are talking about the spirit, I believe it's Yowie, but
yeah, and it apparently is a spirit that roams the earth at night. So some people don't believe it's in like actual physical creature. They believe it's a spirit that does these kinds of things, and it roams at night, which I guess in some stories that, people tell, spirits can eat people or animals or things. I've heard some things like that, and it's terrifying, but I don't know how true that is. But I think one of the earliest sightings that we've heard of so far is from the columnist Margaret Jones, who wrote that the very first Yowie sighting was taken place in 1795.
That's pretty old.
That is very old. And the column is apparently in the Sydney Morning Herald in 1987, if anybody wants to look that up and try to see for themselves if it's true or not.
And this one's also claimed to be the first one to stand perfectly upright, and it would be nearly 5 feet high, so that's basically a person.
That's a very short person. That's my
mom's size. Yeah, it was tailless, and covered with very long black hair, which was of a dirty red or like a snuff color. Oh, because it's kind of like a brownish. About the throat and the chest. Its eyes that were small and restless, well, whatever, were partly hidden by matted hair that covered its head, so it kind of had hair that came down over its face. I'm just imagining an emo Bigfoot.
Oh my god, no. But the thing that you didn't mention was that the fur was matted. All the Bigfoot depictions we've seen, including what people claim are the videos of it, have you seen the hair on those Bigfoots? They're very shiny.
Shampooed.
Yes, they're exactly.
Looks like, actually...
It looks like they take care of themselves.
And it also reminds me of, like, you know, like a long-haired dog or anything like that. After you get them shampooed and conditioned, that conditioner that, like, makes it very silky smooth looking. I guess that's one point for the skeptics when it comes to these things, because it's like, it almost looks like it was perfectly washed and dried, but...
Like they just bought it right off the rack at the costume store.
But there are wild animals that take care of themselves that well also.
Especially maybe a creature like Bigfoot that may have a family and tools and possibly the knowledge of the human situation we talked about earlier, can wash themselves in the rivers.
Or wash each other in the rivers, you know.
One step ahead of old Europeans back in like the 1700s.
Well, because you can imagine, it's like if it's an intelligent creature and it just got done raiding a place and it sees this like long board with a bunch of ridges on it, it's like, what do I do with this? It like hand it to somebody else, and it's like they put some water on, they're just like scrubbing the other one's back with it.
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't go that far. I'm just assuming it waded through the river and it got kind of clean, or it washed its face of the blood. But okay, Ryan. It's like the TikTok we found. The guy's like, where'd you get the sponge?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's just so scary because it feels like the further we get from the American lore of Bigfoot, the more dangerous and scary this creature becomes in other areas, because it's gone from just the Bigfoot that will literally turn around, see a person and be like, meh, they just keep walking. And now we're talking about something that is swallowing a full man alive. Like, I don't understand.
And a couple of them that were actually called carnivore giants. So yeah, so that's some of the other relatives of Bigfoot that you said you had some theories on.
Yeah, I did want to, because I couldn't find too much about these, so I didn't want to make like whole episodes just dedicated to them. So I just wanted to talk a little bit here and there about the relatives of Bigfoot and the things that we could find on them. But now, like, yeah, moving on to theories, when I was looking through all the stuff for Bigfoot, I did find a whole bunch, like way more than I expected, articles of like people comparing Bigfoot to an alien. And at first, like I said, I laughed it off. I was like, that sounds so dumb and silly, like imagining Bigfoot driving a spaceship. And then like right now, as I was talking to Ryan, it clicked, like Chewbacca kind of piloting a ship. And it was just, it blew my mind. And I was like, okay, I kind of can see it now. And maybe do you think that's where that came from? Or
yeah, that's almost exactly where Chewbacca came from, was Nancy almost hit me in the face with a microphone.
Well, Ryan is shouting from across the room.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure, because a lot of the descriptions of him, it's uncanny of that. So
it couldn't not be Bigfoot. Yeah. Someone's got some explaining to do over there. But yeah, so some people have claimed that Bigfoot is actually just an alien, just like the Chupacabra. Like, it's so similar, the things that we found about Bigfoot and the Chupacabra, like the beliefs people have about it, but it also could go back to people not just not knowing where it could have come from, so they just started throwing stuff out there.
Because most cryptids have some sort of link with aliens, where it's just, you can't explain it, it was aliens. You know, it's like the History Channel now. It's like you can't explain it, it's aliens.
And honestly, that makes so much sense. And the thing that just, I guess, throws me off is like Bigfoot living in the woods and all that's like, why is it here on Earth if it's an alien? Why would it just be chilling in the woods somewhere doing whatever? Like, obviously you don't want to be around people. Is it vacationing maybe? It's not doing research on us. It's totally blowing us off, being like, oh, it's them, the hairless ones again.
I just have to jump in with one more of them, because
God.
Where it's like, you know, you see this huge gigantic pyramid of stone and rock, and you have no idea how the heck you could have done that. Aliens. Last one, I promise.
No, that's fine. I want to talk to you about that later because it's something funny that you're gonna laugh about. But yeah, that's honestly the thing with unexplainable cryptids, unexplainable urban legends. It's gotta be aliens. It's gotta be aliens or a bump in the night or the house is just settling. That's my favorite one. My mom's like, the house is settling. Mom, this house has been around since 1907. It should be done settling by now, I think. But that's just my personal thought on that. Oh, you could tell I've got some stuff going on there. But so some people do believe that. I don't know how much of that I believe. I don't know. Now thinking about Chewbacca, maybe I believe it a little bit more. But I know Ryan did mention the possibility of Bigfoot being a kind of pet to aliens, possibly like the Chupacabra that we mentioned.
I've heard things about that one as well, where it's more along the lines of like almost like how Chewie is with Han Solo, like that. The dynamic of
pet, though.
No, but I mean like
companion.
Yeah, well, okay, we normally call our dogs companions a lot of times.
I guess, but like Chewie's like a whole sentient being with a family and a life. He talks.
Do dogs not get families, have sentient conscience?
Yeah, but Han isn't going over there putting Chewbacca's nose in his poop telling him no.
That you know of. But no, like really, jokes aside though, is that in that theory, I can understand why people would think that also, where it's like we don't know the companionship between, let's say aliens and their companions too.
Something I want you to elaborate a little bit on is that you mentioned earlier maybe it was dropped here on Earth like this is its prison, like it did a big no-no.
That was one that I heard a long time ago where it was like it was something that it was all encompassing, like most cryptids, where it's like the reason why we keep seeing them like this and stuff is like this is kind of a detention planet for different like universal beings, where it's like they just drop some of these things off, and it's why we don't see very many of them. That's why, like, and if they've died off, if the ones that have been sent here that they've died off or something, that's why we don't see very many of them anymore, because it's like their time ran out sort of thing. And that's why you don't find any remains, is because they might have been picked up. But it's just like, that's something I heard, and it was like, I'll give that about like 10% of my thought process for it, but it's like, that was interesting to follow that rabbit hole though.
And like, honestly, Earth is feeling like a prison to everyone at this point. They weren't wrong. And then but that can go off to every single tinfoil hat there, because it's like, okay, was that where humans came from, or like the Neanderthals, or are they aliens that were dropped off here, and now we evolved, and we, out of all of the things dropped off here, we made it. Woohoo.
Like the what was the theory about Mars was our old home or something like that, and Adam and Eve were the two that were sent on a spaceship to this other planet to start a new like civilization.
God. So anyway,
that was always fun to look at, just because it's like that is some fanfic right there. Like
a majority of anything written about anything's a fanfic at this point. But that's one of the biggest theories that I've heard when I was looking up these situations. Obviously, it was the Gigantopithecus was like the other one. It's just basically all of the Bigfoot variations were evolutions of this creature, and or this creature evolving to suit whatever habitat that it was in. Because, you go to the snow, you find things like the Yeti that have the white fur to adapt. You go to the wooded areas, you find things like regular Bigfoot that pretty much resembles a bear, which honestly could get away with it. It's like its way of hiding in camouflage. It's like people will just dismiss it. Oh, it's a bear,
Speaking of that actually just reminded me of something then. Maybe that's the reason why skunk ape has like no fur on its knees. If you start overheating, the best place to put an ice pack is to cool down? Your knees.
Really?
Yes. Because apparently like that's one of the major blood vessels or something like that could carry, the cold feeling to the rest of your body to cool you down faster. Maybe that would be why, because it's in a almost inhospitable place for the rest of its body.
Yeah, that's definitely a theory, which, by the way, we are not medical professionals. Please do not quote us on that and say it didn't work.
No,
There's always people out there, right?
Well, because doctors have told me, like, when I'm overheating or anything like that, or like if I need to cool down a bit and everything, they say to put an ice pack underneath my knee.
You do overheat very easily.
I do. Like to put it on the top or the bottom, underneath or above your kneecap.
That's so interesting now, like that we're talking about it, and I can see it now with the way that and it hangs out in the Everglades, so it's water, it's able to cool off easier, and so it doesn't have as much of a hard time being overheated either.
And the spots on it that don't have fur are like some of your major sweat gland zones too. Like you sweat around the center part of your stomach a lot. You sweat around the chest area. So who knows?
I don't know. It's been an interesting conversation. I was like, I don't have too much going on here, but dang, Bigfoot, you out here giving us a whole hour-long episode on just the crazy, first of all, sightings that people have given and the footage that people have claimed to have had. The pictures are terrifying that I've seen of some of these. The way people depict Bigfoot sometimes is like a friendly giant, but I definitely would say, like, if you are someone who's walking around and you see a Bigfoot, I would just say stay away,
And you saying that reminds me of the Bigfoot in media, where Harry and the Hendersons.
I never saw that.
Oh, we gotta see that. It's so funny.
What's it about? Like, now I kind of want to know.
I can't remember the guy's name, the guy that plays the father, but they find a Sasquatch, and he kind of like brings him into his home, and they're trying to kind of like, teach him.
Are they not afraid?
It's not, they're definitely afraid of it at first, but it was
a comedy movie.
It was nice. It was calm and timid and shy. So it was like, he felt bad for it because I believe he thought that he killed it at first.
Oh my god.
He thought that he ran it over. So like, yeah.
So it's definitely a comedy then.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so yeah, that's basically everything that we learned about Bigfoot and the Yeti and the Yeren and the Yowie and the skunk ape. I'm sure there are so many others that we have not heard of or were able to discuss. Oh, yeah. And it's definitely not for lack of trying. We searched up and down the internet. It was just very difficult towards the end to find anything on the variation of species, because it feels like the majority of the information just comes from the American Bigfoot. Maybe because more people have gone and tried to look for it. It's how we ended up with more stories that had to do with it. But that's just my thought on that whole situation. But what I do know is that Bigfoot belongs here with us below the forest floor. So thank you so much to everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we obviously enjoyed making it. So we will see you all later. Bye.
Bye.